People trying to say I'm only in the media. Got a code with my dogs, can't get in between. I can give them life, no more energy. Amen. Amen.
How we doing, everybody? We got divisional round of the NFL playoffs. We got my Lions as the 8 o'clock game. Doesn't get much better, especially when your team is 9.5-point favorites. You're going in feeling pretty good. And now I got JJ here with me. We're going to talk some ball, give you guys some analysis and a parlay. I mean, this day can't get much better. So, JJ, how we doing, man?
I've been waiting for these games for so long. I'm excited.
I mean,
think it's
bro,
going to be really interesting.
This is probably the best weekend of NFL. We only have good deep teams playing. And last week we had more games, but it wasn't great matchups. Next week in the Super Bowl, and obviously it's still going to be good games, but it's less games. We got 2 games going on, no overlap. We just get to sit and watch both of them, or 4 games, counting tomorrow. And they're supposed to be good games. Even with 9.5-point spreads, I don't think anybody's sitting here thinking a blowout's going to happen. I mean, these are still good teams. But, I mean, we can get into it. The first game we got is the Chiefs and Texans. They played pretty recently. Chiefs handled business 27-19. We know that the Chiefs can turn it on in the playoffs. They got Hollywood Brown coming back. JJ, what are you seeing with this Chiefs offense?
Yeah, with this Chiefs offense, you got Hollywood back. I think he's going to be helpful at stretching the field. And it looks like they moved Xavier Worthy more into the slot. So I think he should get targeted a lot there. Who else? Probably in line we were talking about before the show. Noah Gray could be a possible touchdown prop right there. I'm sure you'll tackle that in a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Run game, it looks like it's still going to be a 50-50 split. Something I really just personally don't want to touch. But, I mean, how do you feel about that?
You still think it's going to be 50-50? I think they're just being generous with Pacheco, trying to keep him healthy for the playoffs. I think it's going to be more 65-35. But we don't have much data to say that. I just know I think it was week 14 or so. Andy Reid straight up said he was going to get those starter guys a little limited usage, which I thought was more specific to D-Hop, who is still getting integrated to the offense, Isaiah Pacheco, who is still returning, Hollywood Brown, who is still returning from injury. And I think that was also part of the reason we saw Xavier Worthy's usage tick up, because it's not worried as much about the rookies' usage, more so the vets and the guys coming off injury. So I do think Pacheco's usage picks up a little bit, but Kareem Hunt is also a pretty seasoned vet. As inefficient as he's been, I wouldn't be surprised if they do still mix him in a little bit. On the passing side, you mentioned Xavier Worthy a little bit, and I just said his usage has been going up. I think he's the playmaker of this offense now that Hollywood Brown is back. D-Hop is their through-and-through X receiver. You put him out wide. You say, hey, go win your route. If you're open, we're going to find you. Hollywood Brown's usage has been crazy, even though his route share hasn't been that high. I think it's been 15 targets on 34 routes in the 2 games that he's played, which is ridiculous. And then Travis Kelce in the playoffs. You know he's going to be playing that tight end role. So you have D-Hop with the deep routes, Hollywood Brown with the more intermediate and shallow, and Kelce doing the Kelce things. You can really just do anything with Worthy at that point. He's very versatile. They want the ball in his hands. They don't want him trying to win deep. It'll open up the field when he does run those routes, but for the most part, they want him to get the ball and run. So this offense has now become very, very versatile, and I think that spells a lot of trouble for the Texans. I think the Texans, while I do like their defensive backs, I think their biggest strength has come from causing chaos on the line, getting pressure to quarterbacks. But, I mean, if the Chiefs are getting the ball out quick and they have so many playmakers with the ball in their hands, it's not going to matter. They're not going to have enough time to get to Mahomes. So I think it's going to come down to Andy Reid's play calling. And if it's as good as it usually is, I think it's going to be a lot of problems for this Houston defense.
I agree. And if you think about it, as we have looked at KC the last few years, that slot role is very valuable, and that should be a lot of Worthy there.
Oh, yeah. Now let's get to the Texans side. And before we break everything down, I got one question to ask you, JJ. We got Nico Collins against Trent McDuffie. We know McDuffie is one of the best 1v1 corners in the NFL. We also know how good Nico Collins is. We know he's going to be dominating, or he's been dominating target share with Tank Down, Stephon Diggs both out. Who do you think is winning that matchup?
I'm going to give a slight edge to Trent just because KC is going to have like a too high look. I mean, teams have been running too high against the Texans all season. And I think press coverage, it's going to give them a little extra time for those safeties to give them a little bit more help. So unless he's just running a lot more shallow routes, which I doubt, he's more intermediate to deep, it's going to be a little tough on him.
Yeah, I was really hoping you were going to say that. Otherwise, we're going to be having an argument on this video because, I mean, Nico Collins, I'm one of the biggest Nico Collins truthers in the NFL, but I want nothing to do with Trent McDuffie. I'm going to be honest with you guys. If you can avoid him, you probably have a much higher chance in this game, especially when it comes to too high, because most teams don't run man coverage with the too high system, because what it now does is, even though Nico Collins is on locks, the tight end's probably open, the running back's probably open as a check down. And if you have some semblance of a competent wide receiver too, they're probably open if they're running an in-breaking route. So that leads us to Dalton Schultz, John Mechie, Joe Mixon. I like all three of them. I'm going to be honest. I don't think you necessarily have to choose one. I think the easy option is Dalton Schultz. Tight ends have had a lot of success against Kansas City, but I don't think there's a wrong option. If you wanted to take all three, I genuinely wouldn't be able to talk you off of it.
Yeah. With CJ Stroud, I mean, do you see him stepping up a little bit more going into this game, or see a little bit of the same that we have the last, second half of the season?
I don't. I can't put my finger on why, but he struggles versus too high looks. Combine that with his go-to guy, Nico Collins, likely being in a tougher matchup than normal. If him and Nico can't get some rhythm going early, I think he's going to be scrambling a lot in this game. Not scrambling with his legs, like mentally scrambling, like going crazy. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's seeing ghosts out there. So, I feel like this happens with a lot of Chiefs game where you're just like, oh yeah, they're going to route this team. And then next thing you know, it's a one possession game in the last 4 minutes somehow. But there's no part of this game, I think, where I'm not giving the edge to the Chiefs, which I hate to say. Like, this isn't me saying I want the Chiefs to win. I don't want the Chiefs to win. I hope I'm wrong. But, I mean, I'm looking at this game, and it spells disaster.
Yeah, depleted receiver core. Like, it's hard to win in a situation like this going on the road.
Oh, yeah. What do you think of Joe Mixon? Because I know the Chiefs' run game hasn't been as great this season, but Mixon also hasn't been as great lately. So that seems like a mess in itself. I wasn't sure if you had a read on that. I know a lot of people are fading him this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them for fading him. He's like, the first half of the season, it's the Mixon that like kind of surprised everybody. He's like, oh yeah, now he's on a better team. They're actually giving him the ball. But then the second half of the season, this is the Mixon we all know. He's had like a couple of boom games here and there, but if he doesn't have a boom game, he's having a complete dud.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I don't think he's really gonna do much against the Chiefs, in my opinion. Even though like the Chiefs for the second half of the season was like starting to give up more rushing plays, but he's just not efficient. And I think they're gonna force the CJ Stroud to pass the ball, especially because he did turn it over twice against them. I think they're just gonna use a lot of their pressure packages to make that happen.
No, I agree. I think it's going to be brutal. Stroud is really going to have to prove what everybody thought of him after year one if the Texans want to have a chance in this game. And I'm here for it if he does. This isn't me saying, oh, I think he sucks, this isn't going to happen. I'm just saying it's not looking good. Yeah. But we'll give you this parlay, and then we'll talk Lions and Commanders. It's the second game. And the first leg we went with was the touchdown leg. And the big thing I wanted to target with this one is the Texans allow the third highest rate of passing touchdowns in the NFL, or percentage of touchdowns to be passing touchdowns. And when you look at what targets, where the targets go to in the red zone, it's mostly the tight ends. It's mostly inline tight ends, which is more Noah Gray. He has a higher percentage of routes from like in line with the offensive line. However, his route share is also significantly lower, so we're going to turn to Travis Kelce. He takes some of his routes from the slot, but at the same time, I mean, this is playoff Travis Kelce. I'm pretty sure he has a touchdown in 13 of his last 17 playoff games or some stat like that. So the easy answer for me was Travis Kelce. Next up, we're going Kansas City Chiefs -6.5. I mean, you guys have just heard us rambling for the last, 8 minutes about how much trouble this is for the Texans in their matchup. And the Chiefs just seems like the matchup for the Chiefs. Once we get into the Bills or Ravens next week, I think we can talk a little bit more nuanced details and it can be more of a matchup. But I think this is tailor-made for the Chiefs. And lastly, Dalton Schultz over 37.5 receiving yards. Like we've said, we've been taking tight ends against Chiefs pretty much every season. Any tight end with a competent line above 20 yards that normally has somewhat of any usage has been going over the lines against the Chiefs. So if it's not broken, don't fix it. All that together is plus 564. Go lock that in. And if you want, you can wait until the end of the video because we also combined it with the Lions and Commanders parlay into one big parlay for bigger odds. But let's talk about the next game. Lions, Commanders, two teams with great offenses. They always go for it on fourth down and horrible defenses. JJ, tell me your thoughts.
A lot of points.
A lot of points.
But I mean, when you look at the Commanders offense, Eckler is back. The mix between both the running backs, Brian Robinson Jr. and Eckler getting hurt, there's only a limited amount of games where they play together, but looks to be, Eckler's going to be used mainly in the passing game, Brian Robinson mainly in the rushing game. So I think Daniels here is really going to have to try and extend plays with his legs. I know the Lions have struggled against rushing quarterbacks, and it makes sense because they run a lot of man coverage. It will be interesting to see if they do try to contain him or just lock in on the receivers and just get some coverage sacks. So I mean, how do you see that going?
I think the Commanders are going to do whatever they can to keep the ball out of the Lions' offense hands. So I think they're going to try and run the ball, tire the offensive line out, and then that way, if it's still close to the end of the game, they have that advantage that they can get some chunk plays. The issue with that is while the Lions defense overall isn't great, they'll allow big plays. They'll allow multiple 3, 4, 5 yard rushes without stuffing the run. They're good enough to have a couple good drives. Anzalone stopping a pass to a tight end, one drop pass from a receiver, one stuffed run, and I think the whole drive can blow up pretty easily for the opposing team. So while the Commanders, I think they can have multiple drives where they get points. I think if they go 1 or 2 drives with a 3 and out, or just 2 drives where they don't get across midfield, and the Lions respond on one of them, I think they get in trouble very quickly. Because if the Lions get a good lead, the Commanders can no longer try and control the clock and tire the defense out until the fourth quarter. Now they have to play catch up, and their game plan just unravels very quickly. On the other side, the Commanders can just say, fuck that, we're going pound for pound against your offense, against our offense, and just go and get those chunk plays from the beginning, try and punch them in the mouth. I could see that happening as well, especially with the way they normally call their offense. The one thing that I wanted to ask you about the Commanders' offense, JJ, is I think it was Mina Kimes gave out a stat that the Lions run blitzes with their DBs at a very high rate. I think one of the highest in the NFL. Jaden Daniels is tied with Patrick Mahomes for EPA per dropback against DB blitz. Do you think that means he's going to break out and run more, or he's going to be able to pick those spots that the blitzes are coming from and beat them in that sense? Because I think that's going to be the big difference between whether it's chunk plays or whether there's slow, methodical drives that tire out the defense.
I'm going to lean towards the slow and methodical drives here. I think he's done well enough to where he's proven he can pretty much read a defense for like an NFL level. So I think he will see those blitzes coming. And, with this offense, everything's going to be a lot of quick hitters. So I think that's where he can take advantage of. That will slow the pace down. Even though they do play fast, they do run a lot of plays, which kill clock.
Yeah.
So as long as they can mix that in with the run game, it'll kind of, in a way, be an extension of the run game. Screen passes, slants, stuff like that, quick outs. I think that's going to be very important here to keep the drive alive.
I like that a lot. And I think you saying that almost makes me think Eckler, which I know we talked about a little bit before the show, because if the Lions are going to be running man coverage while this is happening and single high to close down the middle of the field, I think that removes a tight end. I think that removes any in breakers from the wide receiver 2s and 3s on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then Terry McLaurin, unless they have deliberate plays to open him up, he's going to need a little bit more time for those routes to develop that I don't think he'll have. The DBs coming on the blitz. So I think that check down to Austin Eckler, where you just have him 1v1 and he has to beat a guy in open field, I think it's going to be very advantageous to the Lions here, or to the Commanders, sorry. So that was one thing that I was wanted to ask you about, because I've been trying to wrap my head around what that stat might mean for where the plays are going to go. As far as Amik Robertson, last time we saw him, he had Justin Jefferson on locks. Some people might think, oh, if he did that, maybe he's going to do that to Terry McLaurin this week. If you guys don't already know, I am a very strong Lions fan. I can tell you that that's not happening. He was able to do that to Justin Jefferson for two reasons. One, he's played against him pretty much growing up. They've always played against each other. They know each other's tendencies. Two, one of the reasons he was able to do that was he was very physical with Justin Jefferson at the line. And as a Lions fan I've seen in years past, Jeff Okudah, even though he hasn't had the best career since entering the NFL, he had very good games against Justin Jefferson for the same reason. He was very, very physical with him, especially at the line. I don't think that's going to work against Terry McLaurin. I think Terry McLaurin is a bit more capable strength-wise, physically, and I think he's expecting it a little bit more, as I think he's more of a traditional X receiver. He doesn't move around as much, at least pre-snap. So we've seen wide receiver ones dominate the Lions all season. I'm not going to let one game that I think, even though I didn't predict, in hindsight I should have predicted, of Justin Jefferson having trouble, I'm not going to let that change my narrative on Terry McLaurin. I think Terry McLaurin has a very good game here.
Yeah, I think you made a very excellent point there with the difference between knowing the player and not, and all that physicality. How do you see a way where the Commanders can win this game?
I think
what would be like the keys?
I think Terry McLaurin is going to have to be a very big part, and I'm not just saying that because of the spiel I just had. I don't think you can lie on De'Ami Brown again like they did last week. I don't think that's going to work. I think it
was a one-game thing, in my opinion.
100%. Zacchaeus I like, but I think he's good for 30 to 40 yards, as a wide receiver 2 should be. I don't think he's the guy where, he's going to have a 70-yard game and pick up the slack for everybody. The Lions are great versus tight ends, and not Zach Ertz isn't really a needle mover. He might get a crucial first down at some point in a game, but he's rarely the reason you win or lose a game. And then it comes down to the run game, which I think the Commanders will have success with. But if that's not accompanied with Terry McLaurin, I don't think it's going to matter. However, if you have a good game with Terry McLaurin and an average to slightly below average run game, I think they can still win this game. But defensively, I think it's going to come down to the Amon-Ra St. Brown matchup, because they haven't been as good against the slot. They allow, I think, the highest yards per reception against the slot lately. Having that and then going against Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of spells disaster. Knowing that, and knowing Jameson Williams isn't a volume type receiver, and knowing how much they want to run the ball, you can't let both get going. You can't allow them to get 10-yard, 15-yard chunk plays to Amon-Ra St. Brown and give up the run. I don't have any confidence that they're going to stop the run. So you have to pick and choose. So if you go all out to stop the run, it's probably not going to work, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown is still going to have a good game. Or if you focus a little bit more on Amon-Ra and say, hey, they're going to have the run. We just have to do our best to not let them score every drive with it. I think that's just how it's going to work. So I think stopping, at least limiting Amon-Ra St. Brown's volume in this one, I think is going to be very key defensively for them.
I like that. Now we got Lions offense.
David Montgomery's back, which I'm very excited for. I think the funniest thing is I saw a report today that Jahmyr Gibbs will remain the RB1 of the Lions offense. Throw that report out the window. It's going to be a two-headed monster no matter which way you put it. They're each going to get 10 to 15 rush attempts. That's how it's been all season. Jahmyr Gibbs has always been the more efficient back. Like, this isn't new information. But David Montgomery adds a different element to that rushing offense that they need and they want. The coaches have said multiple times that it's very important to this offense. If Jahmyr Gibbs is averaging 7 yards a carry, David Montgomery will still probably be getting 12 rush attempts. Mm-hmm. So go ahead and throw those reports out the window. I don't think that either of them is in a better spot than the other. I think both their usages are pretty similar in terms of what scheme they use, what points of the game they're used. I think you guys know David Montgomery is more of the bruiser back. Jahmyr Gibbs is more of provides more of the spark of the offense. That's fine. You want that balance. I don't think the Commanders can stop either one of them. Going to the passing game, Amon-Ra St. Brown probably has one of the better mismatches you can ask for. If the run game really does get going, you can see Sam Laporta in the play action game a little bit. And then Jameson Williams, I mean, it comes down to limiting those 2 deep shots pretty much. He'll get a couple of slants, he'll get a couple comeback routes. If you don't let him have that 40-yard deep ball, you stop it just once, maybe throw some help over top on a second one. You put yourself in a pretty good spot for the Commanders. But if you're doing that, you're probably allowing Amon-Ra St. Brown to have space. So for both the sides, I know I'm saying that Lions can do whatever they want. I think both sides pretty much can do whatever they want against these defenses. It's more going to be about how the coach wants to play it. We're not in the locker rooms. We don't know what the coaches are going to do. But yeah, I think it's pretty wide open on both sides.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in full agreement here with all that. You know, I feel like with the Lions offense, it's a little more cut and dry, trying to break it down. Especially with you being a Lions fan, it makes it so much easier.
I think it helps that everybody has a pretty clear role. Like,
yeah,
there's not overlap. I think it was Matt Harmon, and he said something last year that's always stuck with me. One of the biggest strengths to the Lions offense is that they never have routes that overlap each other, where if one's covered, both are covered. If one route is covered, that means there is another one that's open with how spread out and how layered it all is, which is a very big plus. And when you have that combined with the very clear roles of Amon-Ra St. Brown at the slot, Jameson Williams as your speed threat, and Sam Laporta, just knowing how to leak out into zones where nobody is expecting it. Because Laporta's had a bit more of a down year this year. It hasn't been from lack of performance. It's just that's how the offense has been called. But pretty much every time you've needed him to settle into a zone well or chip a block and break out into play action, he's been able to do it pretty much every time he's wanted to. So having that, and then the run game of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, there's never a question of, oh, if you stop past the middle of the field, you really stunt the offense, because it's so balanced that it doesn't matter. And it's just a matter of what is the defense going to give them. You know exactly where the offense is going to go then. So I think it seems more clear because I'm a Lions fan, but I think if you paid attention to them, it's also just like pretty cut and dry. You don't have to dig that deep to see it. All right, let's get to the parlay in that one.
Let's get to it.
All right, so the first leg, Brian Robinson or Jaden Daniels to get a touchdown in this game. Rushing touch, or not rushing touchdown specific, anytime touchdown. But we're targeting the rushing touchdown aspect in this game because I had the sheet up. Where'd it go? Well, anyways, the Lions allow like the third highest rushing touchdown percentage in the NFL, and Eckler doesn't get any rushing touchdown usage. Neither does Jeremy Nichols or whatever, however you pronounce his last name. So it leaves Jane Daniels and Brian Robinson. And while Brian Robinson's rush share is like 2 times as high, I love the scrambling aspect of Jaden Daniels. And I think this is like a minus 180 prop. I think it should be like minus 250, minus 300, knowing that how high that percentage is and knowing the usage. I think both of them combined take like 80% of the usage in the end zone or in the red zone. So I think that one's pretty straightforward. Next up, Terry McLaurin, 70-plus receiving yards. The Lions have been getting killed by wide receiver ones all season. Jane Daniels is going to be able to break out of pressure and scramble, and it's going to open up some of the deeper route, more time for the deeper routes to develop. I think that's got Terry McLaurin written all over it. And lastly, over 49.5 points. I mean, me and JJ just ranted for 15 minutes about how both these defenses stand no chances and the offense can just pick whatever spots they want. This game could realistically go 35-15 blowout. It could go 27-30. You can pick it how you want it. This game's going over. The normalized 55.5. We bought a couple points because 55.5 is kind of a ridiculous line. I still think 55.5 is also too low for what it's worth. All of that together is plus 223. If you combine it with what we got in the Chiefs-Texans game and the 20% boost that FanDuel is offering, you get plus 2,416. $10 max on that to win $251. I'm excited. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Make sure you check our next video where we're going to be breaking down the Sunday slate as well. Otherwise, let's enjoy some good football today. JJ, let's make some money. Always good to talk with you. We'll see you guys next show.